I watched his text bubble disappear, and in the next minute his number was gone forever instantly. The screen turned black, and my heart shattered into 1,000 tiny screams. I had no idea that asking him to test the waters before kids would instantly destroy the life we'd built together, and that in exactly 3 hours, my entire reality would be ripped apart by a single, silent swipe. What I'm about to tell you is the raw, unfiltered aftermath of a phrase I thought was harmless, and the devastating, unbelievable chain reaction it set off. I'm Maya, 29, a freelance graphic designer who spends half the day scrolling through Instagram filters and the other half hunched over a laptop, chasing deadlines for boutique brands that never seem satisfied. I love my freedom, my curated feed, my brunches with friends that always look like a Pinterest board. I love my boyfriend, Ethan, tall, dark-haired, a software engineer who can code an app in his sleep and still make the perfect latte for me on lazy Sunday mornings. We moved in together 2 years ago, painted the walls a soft dove gray, and built a tiny sanctuary that felt like a permanent vacation. Our friends were constantly dropping hints about Bobby's. You two would make such great parents, said Jenna, our mutual friend from college, while scrolling through a photo of a newborn on her feed. When are you guys going to have a kid? Asked my mother in a text that read, I'm already knitting sweaters for your future little one. I laughed it off, but the question lingered like a low-frequency hum in the background of every conversation. I wasn't ready. Not yet. I wanted to travel more, to take a sabbatical and write a novel I'd been daydreaming about for years. I wanted to keep my life fluid, my schedule open, my bedroom a space for yoga mats and not a nursery. So when Ethan suggested we start thinking about kids, I felt my chest tighten. I didn't want to say no outright. That would have been a bomb, an instant fracture. I needed a softer landing. That's when I said it. I think we should test the waters before we jump into parenthood. I said it in a coffee shop, the way you say something that sounds reasonable but is actually a vague, slippery slope. Ethan's eyebrows lifted, his smile faltered for a split second, and then he nodded, as if he understood the metaphor. Sure, he said, we can see how it feels. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking I'd bought us a little more time. What I didn't know was that his brain had already begun cataloging that phrase, cross-referencing it with every article he'd ever read about commitment, every podcast episode about testing the waters in relationships, and every meme that joked about men fleeing when women mention Bobby's. He took that phrase as a signal that I was pulling back, that I was not ready to commit to the next big step. In his mind, it was a red flag, a warning sign that the future I imagined didn't include him. The next morning, Ethan texted me a link to a TED Talk about why couples should talk about kids early. I clicked it, half amused, half curious, and watched a charismatic speaker explain that testing the waters often means testing the limits of the relationship. My stomach dropped. I felt a sudden, terrifying clarity. I had just handed him a lifeline to jump ship. I tried to play it cool. I'm just being practical, I typed back, attaching a meme of a cat with a tiny life preserver. We can see how we feel after a few months of traveling more. I added a winky face, hoping humor would soften the blow. He replied with a single okay. No emojis, no jokes. The conversation ended there, and I felt a cold knot form in my gut. That night, I posted a picture of my morning coffee on Instagram, captioned, Testing the Waters, Life in Progress. My followers flooded the comments with heart emojis and supportive messages. Love this, wrote Jenna. You're doing great, added a stranger I'd never met. I felt a surge of validation, a brief lift that made the anxiety feel less sharp. I was surrounded by digital applause, a chorus of strangers cheering me on while the real conversation with Ethan was falling apart. The next day, Ethan didn't show up for our scheduled brunch. He sent a quick text, hey, I'm swamped at work. Can we reschedule? I brushed it off, assuming he was genuinely busy. I told my mother, he's probably just caught up with a project. My mother replied, honey, you know how those tech guys are always pulling all-nighters. I felt a flicker of relief. Maybe it was just a temporary glitch. 2 days later, I received a notification from my phone. Ethan's number is no longer in service. My heart lurched. I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the call button, as if I could summon him back with a press. I called his old number. It rang, then went straight to voicemail, a sterile voice saying, the number you have dialed is no longer in service. I tried his email, no response. I checked his LinkedIn profile, his headline still read software engineer at TechWave. I Googled his name, found a new address in Portland, Oregon, and a photo of him holding a surfboard at a beach that was definitely not ours. He had changed his number and moved to another state. In less than 72 hours, the man I'd shared a lease with, a Netflix password with, a future with, had vanished like a ghost in the night. The phrase "test the waters" had become a literal warning sign, a beacon that lit up his escape route. I felt the world tilt, the floor beneath me cracking. I sat on the couch, phone clutched like a lifeline, scrolling through the last week of our messages. "I'm thinking about the future," he'd typed. "Maybe we should talk about kids." "I'm not ready yet," I'd responded. "We can test the waters." And there it was, my own words, the catalyst for his departure, the very thing that had shattered the foundation of our relationship. I called my best friend Leela, who lived 3 blocks away. "He's gone," I whispered, the words tasting like ash. "He changed his number. He's in Oregon." Leela's voice was calm, but I could hear the tremor underneath. "Maya, you need to breathe. This is insane. Did you really think he'd stay if you weren't 100 on kids?" She paused, then added, "You gave him an out and he took it. That's his choice, not yours." I felt a wave of shame wash over me. I knew she was right, but I also felt a sting of injustice. I had been the one who'd thrown the first stone, and now he'd run away, leaving me to pick up the pieces. My mind raced. What if I had said "I'm not ready" outright? Would he have stayed and fought for us? Or would he have left anyway? The irony was brutal. My attempt to soften the blow had only made it sharper. The next morning, I logged onto Facebook and saw a post from Ethan's sister, Maya, no relation, announcing his new job at a startup in Portland. She wrote, "Excited for Ethan's new adventure. He's moving to the Pacific Northwest. Can't wait to see what he builds next." The comments were a mixture of congratulations and confusion. One of Ethan's former coworkers wrote, "He always talked about needing space. Good luck, man." I scrolled, my eyes burning, as the digital world confirmed the reality I'd tried to deny. I posted a story on Instagram, a blurred photo of my empty kitchen, captioned "New chapter, new beginnings." The likes poured in, but the comments felt hollow. "Sending love," wrote Jenna. "Take care of yourself," said a random follower. The validation that once felt like a safety net now felt like a thin veneer over a gaping wound. I started receiving messages from people I barely knew, offering advice. "Don't blame yourself," one wrote. "It's not your fault," another said. I wanted to believe them, but the guilt was a heavy chain around my neck. I knew I'd been defensive, that I'd tried to protect my freedom, but I also realized I'd been selfish. I'd used testing the waters as a shield, never considering how it might be perceived as a test of his commitment, an implicit ultimatum. The next week, my mother called. "Maya, I saw Ethan's Instagram story. He's on a beach in Oregon. Are you okay?" I forced a smile into my voice. "I'm fine, Mom. He's just taking a break." My mother's silence on the other end was deafening. "You know, honey, sometimes people leave because they feel unheard," she said finally. "Maybe you should think about what you really want, not just what you think you need." I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, the steam fogging the glass. My eyes were red, my hair disheveled, my skin pale from sleepless nights. I realized I'd been living in a bubble of curated perfection, where every post was a highlight reel, every conversation filtered through the lens of social approval. I'd let my fear of losing control dictate my words, and now the consequences were devastatingly real. I decided to confront the narrative head-on. I wrote a long, raw post on my blog, something I'd never done before. I titled it, "Testing the Waters: How a Metaphor Destroyed My Relationship." I poured out every detail: the coffee shop conversation, the text messages, the Instagram likes, the sudden disappearance. I wrote, I thought I was protecting my autonomy, but I was actually testing his patience. I was the one who set the stage for his exit. Within minutes, the comments flooded. Some were supportive, others critical. "You need to own your part," wrote a reader. "You also need to set boundaries," another added. A former colleague who had known Ethan commented, "He loved you, Maya." He didn't want to be the one who forced a timeline. The mixture of perspectives made me feel both exposed and validated. The story was no longer just mine, it was a collective conversation about expectations, communication, and the hidden power dynamics in relationships. I received a private message from a therapist I'd followed on Instagram, Dr. Patel. "Maya, thank you for sharing your story. It takes courage to be vulnerable. If you ever want to talk, I'm offering a free 30-minute session for anyone who reaches out through this post." I booked the session, feeling a flicker of hope that perhaps I could untangle the knot I'd tied. During the call, Dr. Patel asked, "What does testing the waters mean to you now?" I hesitated, then answered. It means I was afraid of committing, but I was also afraid of losing him. I used a vague phrase to protect myself, but I never considered how it would feel to him. She nodded. When we use metaphors, we give the other person a script to interpret. If the script suggests doubt, they may feel insecure and act to protect themselves. It's not about blame, it's about recognizing the impact of our language. The session felt like a mirror held up to my soul. I saw my own defensive mechanisms reflected back: the need to control, the fear of vulnerability, the reliance on social validation to feel worthy. I realized that my test was not about us, but about my own readiness to face the unknown. I had tried to keep the future fluid, but in doing so, I'd forced Ethan into a binary choice: stay and compromise his comfort, or leave and preserve his autonomy. The next day I called Jenna, my college friend, and we met for a walk in the park. She listened, eyes soft, and then said, I've been there. I told my boyfriend I needed space before we had kids, and he left too. It's a pattern, Maya. Men often interpret space as a sign that they're not wanted. She handed me a coffee. You deserve someone who can sit with the uncertainty with you, not someone who runs at the first hint of doubt. I felt the weight of those words settle. I had been so focused on my own narrative that I'd missed the larger cultural script playing out. My story was not an isolated incident. It was part of a larger pattern where men feel threatened by ambiguous language, where women use testing as a coping mechanism, and where both parties suffer because of miscommunication. I decided to write a follow-up post, this time offering a guide how to talk about kids without testing the waters. I listed concrete steps: clear language, shared timelines, acknowledging each other's fears, and setting boundaries. I included a checklist: 1. State your desire or hesitation directly. 2. Ask your partner how they feel. 3. Discuss concrete next steps, not metaphors. The post went viral, shared by parenting groups, relationship forums, and even a few men's mental health pages. I felt a strange mix of vindication and humility. My mistake had become a teaching moment for hundreds of strangers, but the emotional whiplash didn't stop there. A week after the post, I received a message from Ethan's sister, Maya. Hey, Maya. I saw your post. I'm sorry for how things ended. Ethan is doing okay, he's in a relationship now, and he's happy. I wanted to thank you for being honest. It helped me understand why he left so abruptly. I felt a pang of guilt. My story had exposed his pain, but also gave him a chance to move on without the weight of secrecy. I replied, thank you for reaching out. I'm glad he's okay. I'm learning to own my part, too. The conversation was brief, but it closed a loop that had been left open for months. It was a small act of closure, a reminder that even in the aftermath of a devastating breakup, there can be moments of empathy and humanity. In the months that followed, my life settled into a new rhythm. I traveled solo to a cabin in the woods, wrote the first chapters of my novel, and started a podcast about relationship communication. I invited guests, therapists, sociologists, people who'd been through similar test the waters scenarios to discuss how language shapes our connections. The podcast grew, and listeners wrote in, sharing stories of how a single phrase had either saved or shattered their relationships. One night, after recording an episode about the power of directness, I received a text from a woman named Priya. Your story helped me realize I've been using vague language with my boyfriend for years. We talked tonight, and we're actually planning to adopt next year. Thank you. I felt a surge of purpose. My mistake had become a catalyst for others to find clarity. I still think about that coffee shop moment, the way Ethan's smile flickered, the way my heart raced when I said test the waters. I think about the instant I saw his number vanish, the sudden realization that my words had been a trigger, the devastating emptiness that followed. I think about the cascade of social media reactions, the supportive comments, the critical ones, the strangers who reached out, the therapist who helped me see the pattern. I've learned that the words we choose are not just decorative, they are weapons, shields, and bridges. They can expose hidden insecurities, destroy trust, or reveal truth. I've learned that being defensive, even with self-awareness, can still hurt the people we love. I've learned that the power dynamic in a relationship is fluid. Today, I was the confident, controlling partner. Tomorrow, I was the one left scrambling for answers. Most importantly, I've learned that justice isn't about revenge, it's about growth. Ethan left, and his departure forced me to confront my own flaws. He found a new life, and I found a new purpose. The karma was not a punishment, but a mirror reflecting back the consequences of my ambiguous language. If there's one thing I want you, the reader, to take away, it's this: when you're tempted to test the waters, stop and ask yourself, what are you really testing? Are you protecting yourself, or are you unintentionally pushing the other person away? Speak directly, own your feelings, and give the other person a chance to respond honestly. It's not about losing control, it's about building a partnership where both people feel seen, heard, and respected. I still scroll through my Instagram feed, but now I post less about curated perfection and more about real moments: my messy kitchen, the half-finished manuscript, the sunrise over the Pacific when I visited Ethan's new home for closure. I've learned that authenticity, even when painful, is far more rewarding than the illusion of a flawless life. In the end, the phrase "test the waters" didn't just test Ethan's patience, it tested my own capacity for honesty, for vulnerability, and for growth. It revealed the fragile architecture of my relationship, exposed the hidden expectations that had been building like cracks in a dam, and forced a sudden, devastating release. The water rushed out, and I was left standing on dry ground, drenched in regret, but also in the possibility of rebuilding. Now, when I think about the future, whether it includes children, a partner, or simply more solo adventures, I do so with a clearer mind. I no longer hide behind metaphors. I speak plainly, I listen deeply, and I accept that sometimes the waters are too turbulent to test, and that's okay. The only thing that matters is that I'm honest with myself and with the people I love before the tide